All right, well, the battle of the social media giants is on. Twitter rival Threads from Meta reaching a major milestone, 100 million users in just 5 days since the app's launch, this making it the fastest growing app in history. For more on this, we want to bring in Dan Ives, the Wedbush Managing Director and Senior Equity Analyst. Dan, I heard that you're still not a fan of Threads despite some of the traction that it's getting from millions of users. Why aren't you buying in yet?
I think it's just the content. I mean, ultimately, from a newsfeed perspective, look, I get because the Instagram affiliation, you're going to continue to see users ramp. I believe engagement over the next few months is going to go down significantly. I think this is one where I get the hype, the anti-Twitter Musk view, but I'd rather eat broccoli for the full day than be on Threads.
Rather eat broccoli? That's a pretty harsh assessment of Threads.
I just don't see it. I mean, as someone that's on social media all the time, I've spent probably 6-7 hours in the platform. The news feed is Instagram-ish. It's all over. You can't control it. It's G-rated, right, in terms of from a content perspective. I get some want that, but ultimately, I mean, to me, and I've gone through all, different iterations of it, I'm just not seeing the attractiveness of Threads outside of just the anti-Twitter, anti-Musk sort of movement.
So, Dan, what do you think is going to happen to Threads then? Is this something that you see Zuckerberg sticking with and just being an option here for users? I mean, when we talk about the monetization opportunity of this, some of your peers on the street see this as potentially adding, I wouldn't say significant given the size of Meta's business, but adding to its bottom line. Do you see that potential at all?
Yeah, look, for Meta, it's additive. I mean, it's definitely a trophy case moment coming out of the gates for Zuckerberg. The 100 million is a significant number, and it's really minimal downside. I mean, from a Meta perspective. Now, I do believe, as we've seen with Metaverse and other standalone apps, I mean, I think really the success is going to be what engagement looks like 2, 3, 4 months from now. But I'm just not of view that this is a Twitter killer. I think it's an alternative platform. Many will engage in it, but in my opinion, it's going to be an uphill battle to gain meaningful share, as we go into the next, call it 4 or 5 months.
Let's talk about another stock, Dan, that you've been following, and that is Rivian. I mean, I want to show the chart here because it has just been an incredible run-up. When you think about the excitement around this, you've upped your price target as well. But what has fundamentally changed about the Rivian story?
The main thing that changed is production. I mean, demand was never the issue. Rivian was always going to be what I view as almost a category former in terms of electric vehicles, what RJ and the team built. Production coming out of the gate, it was excuses. It was 1 step forward, 2 steps back for really, call it, 4 or 5 quarters. Now finally turned the corner. I believe the worst is in the rearview mirror. And from a valuation perspective, I mean, $30 could be base case as this all starts to play out. That's why I think you're starting to see many jump into the name, as it feels like this is definitely hitting an inflection point.
Dan, his partnership with Amazon, how big of a catalyst do you see that being for Rivian?
It's significant because on the commercial side, and also even getting into Europe. And that's something where they've built a pretty significant iron fence around that partnership. I think there were many that were worried about it in terms of the Amazon relationship. But I think, look, from a sum of the parts, it just adds more and more to the Rivian story. And I do think this was one, it was thrown on the side of the road, hitchhiking. No investors were focused on Rivian. And now all of a sudden you're starting to see it get back on track. And that's why I think you've seen still a lot of bears go into hibernation on the name.
Rivian specifically on the passenger cars, you could argue they haven't faced as much competition. But you've got potentially the Cybertruck here. We're expecting a delivery event at the end of Q3. How big of a threat does Tesla pose to Rivian's momentum?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really view that as a threat from a competition perspective. I believe this is going to be a rising tide that lifts a lot of boats, not just in terms of Rivian. I think what you see with Ford in terms of the Lightning, what you'll see with Cybertruck coming out probably around Halloween. I mean, this is really the start of a generational shift on electric vehicles around pickup, sports utility. And I think it's a green tidal wave. This is a $5 trillion transformation across electric vehicles. no doubt right now it's Tesla's world, everyone else is paying rent. But there's going to be others that benefit here. And that's why I think Rivian's part of that mix. That's not just going to be a survivor, but I think going to be one that's going to be around for years to come.
We've been talking a lot about EV adoption and what that price tag should be, or what's that sweet spot that allows for widespread adoption. You look at something like the Model 3, obviously the price has come down significantly because of the incentives there. But if we're talking specifically trucks, it's still a pretty high price point. What do you think is the sweet spot?
I think something in that 50K range, 50, 55 is sort of the sweet spot. And then no doubt, I mean, it's above that sweet spot. Now, if you look at it even a year ago, it was more than that. But I think you got to ultimately see those price points come down. I think that is going to happen. I think production's key, battery technology. It's no different than what we've seen with Tesla. At prices come down, because I think for mass adoption on passenger cars, you really need to see it in the 30s and 40s. And when you look at trucks, I'd say 50s sort of into the high 40s is sort of the sweet spot as we go into the next few years to see massive adoption.
Okay, well, I'll continue to watch that story. Well wishes, Dan Ives. Always good to have you on the show.